1,582,460 logs in the boom. And that comes out to 318,342,712 board feet. So that was the peak. And then also I have figured, brought with you the company to explain it a little bit. The balloon company, only 100 shares. John Lee Hyten had 1 share. He was a millionaire. John Du Bois, or Dubois Jr., had 25 shares, and Matthew Dubois had 25. James Perkins had 24 shares, and he was the guy who, I say invented it, but he found one in Maine like it and thought we could do it in the river. And Isaiah Smith had 20, and Ellis Howe Lowe had 5. And all of them were millionaires. And then we'll talk a little bit about getting Peter Hurdy got a hold of the balloon, raised the prices and so forth. He made more. But remember now that this was in 1846. This was the beginning of the boom, and all these fellas, and even John Lee Hyten became a millionaire with just 1 share. Can you imagine multiplying 25 cents to 1 million? What do you get? Okay, now, any questions so far? Are any of your people were in the lumber business in Williamsport or not? So what were they in?
Sawyer.
And
I don't know what company.
a logger.
I don't know.
Any others that were in?
My great-grandfather was
all
the last
right.
manager of the boom.
What?
My great-grandfather was the last manager of the boom. Chris Tice.
Oh, all right. Yes, he was the. Yeah. He's going to be in my Province Heroes because he was one of the last ones there.
Yeah.
These people aren't too far away from us because most of them worked at the boom, and of course the boom and the lumber industry really was gone by 1909. The last law went through. Okay, Miriam, let's begin. We'll get the lights and Oh, wait, third one. We're going to do this before you wait. We celebrated the last craft. And of course, in 1938, all of those of you who are of age now remember it crashed. Well, the Muncie Historical Society has made a tape of it, and it's very good. The last raft that came down in 38 and so forth. And this is a piece of the old raft here. This is a song that Dr. Will George Butler wrote in commemoration of the raft coming down the river in 1938. Now, it crashed the Muncie Bridge, but it went all the way down to Harrisburg. People don't realize that it was smashed up there, but the rest of the survivors continued on down. It was during March of 1938. And so Butler wrote this. Now, Butler was associated with Lycoming College. He was here in the early 1900s. He wrote Fair Dickinson, which is alma mater to Dickinson Seminary, the predecessor of Lycoming College. Then he went on to Mansfield. He wrote Yale Mansfield, and the building is named after him, the Butler Center there. He also wrote the official hymn of the George Washington Bicentennial of the United States in song. And so I'll play this now. And this is the Song of the Raftsmen. This was to be played when they were passing Harrisburg. And I'm trying to get a Harrisburg paper to see if they actually did this at a ceremony there at Harrisburg. Okay? And we'll get the picture started.
Of the hill, once again lend us their thrill, as harvest of primeval days, to thy glories anthems raise, as we bring our meed of loudest praise. Hi-ho, merrily down the stream we go. We sing the craftsman's song once more, with thoughts of long ago. Hi-ho, joyfully shout the woodsman's lore. Our hearts are gay while we pull away, as on we go. Lumber camps of yesterday fondly in our memory play, as we sing our present roundelays, our present roundelays. Lumberjacks in flannel clothes, skidding logs in winter snows, as with radiant health that cheers and glows. Hi-ho, merrily down the stream we go. We sing the raftsman's song once more, with thoughts of long ago. Hi-ho, joyfully shout the woodsman's lore. Our hearts are gay while we pull away, as on we go.
The dedicatory remarks are to Governor Earl, who was governor at that time in the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, Mary, we're ready now with the lights, and we'll begin. That wasn't a logger singing that.
It should be men.
Yes, I
And
think
it
it
should
should be
go
a
faster.
chorus of men or something singing it in like a song. Okay, all right, I'm gonna get in front. This is the postcard. These are the Victorian postcards we worked here before. There's a whole series of. This is the Lumber City, Williamsport, 1939, and this was the last draft. But this was the American Legion had a convention here in 1939, and this was the official badge of the Legion convention here, okay? Now, this is part of my book, and this is written by O.R. Thompson, who was the first librarian of the Brown Library. Now, in James B. Brown's will, it said that they were to hire a professional librarian, and so they hired Mr. Thompson. And I brought this page here because this is a poem about Williamsport. It's sort of not in rhyme, but it's McGinn is supported by McGinn and Garrison, and they are the historians of the area. Development's history found and recorded, Michael Rostock, or the lumber barons, as we call them. Winners, Cochrane, Munson, the Du Bois, and you want to be the French, Du Bois, the Deemers, the Williams, the Forsmans, the Bowmans, the Tinsmans, the Browns, the Clarks, the Howes, the Paynes, and the Colemans and the Lentzes. And why is Lentz last, I don't know, but he was one of the first millionaires. And his home is down on East 3rd Street. That was first millionaire, so if you come next month, we'll do that program there. But Lentz, of course, was one of the early ones, and his house now is done over completely, and it's the law office there. So, okay, this is coming through the chute. This is the timber raft coming through the chute of the dam across the river. They had to build a dam to make the water high so they could hold the log. Okay. Okay. Now, the logging industry was dependent on three and four things. First of all, we had to have the great forests around here, untouched by the Native Americans. Maybe they built a few homes with it, but nothing like we used before. Next, we were on the river that flowed from north to south and had a lot of streams that connected to it on the north side of it, and it was quite navigable in the spring, fall, in the spring and in winter when the river was high. And then what did we do? We built a boom on the river, okay? A boom on the river merely is little log cabins built, taken to the middle of the river, sunk in chains, and then stopped the logs. This is over in Nippenose Valley, and this, they believe, is the last set of virgin timber in the area. This picture was taken many years ago, but this is the type of trees, the size of it, and of course, nature, the bugs, and so forth have now destroyed most of this. I've knocked it over. This is private property, so you can't get on it anymore. But this was the first set the last of the, and there's one up in Losac Creek, I believe, that has another set of little acreage of original virgin timber. Okay? Now, in the Tabor Museum, this is a crosscut, and you notice it is, you get it focused there, 28 inches. Now, can you imagine how many 2x4s and 4x8s you can get out of this? This was the size of the logs. Usually the logs, the trees were 300 years old, and then after that, then they probably were eaten by bugs and lightning struck them and so forth. So this is the size now of the trees that were there, okay? Now this is a camp of 50 men. The log cabin here was built to be dismantled and moved, which they used horses and oxen. And most of these gentlemen were young. They were 19, 20, up to 25 years old, because this was hard work. They worked every day. They ate huge meals. But they were up at the crack of dawn. They ate them out in the fields. They had an hour off for lunch. They ate and went back again. And they would fell all of the trees. Okay? Now this is a minor, well, you want to say a 5-man crew here. This is what it took to fell the trees. Notice the high buckles here, the suspenders, we're back to that era, and the instruments there. Most of them wore hats in those days there. So if you can see there, they're not old men. We figure, some people said, well, I can remember the old loggers, they were old men. Well, yes, but they were boys when they started living. They were in their late teens and early 20s, okay? Now, to move the logs, they did a lot of the lumbering in the winter, and we had snow. We didn't have snow this year. And so they would put them on these sleds and then pull them out of the woods there with these are Belgian dredge horses or something like that. These are really work horses, okay? Bring them out. And this is the spar tree. Now the first industry was, these were the masts of the Great White Fleet, which we had, which lasted until the Monitor and the Merrimack and the Monitor fought a war, and now they were ironclad. They were not sail-driven ships, they're now motorized ships. But this was our industry, and this is where the rafts came in. They rafted them together from the forest and then sent them down the river, okay? 90 feet tall. And they were tied together around there, you can see, and they were put into sections. You'll see why, because when they go through the rapids, okay? Okay, now this is not a shot from the last raft. This is actually a picture of the rafting. Notice how it's tied together. And usually the weight of the log kept them about an inch of water on the logs many times. They did not float high because they were. And so here's their big oar in the back. This was tough. And the lumbermen had to know the river, because the Susquehanna River isn't just one very merrily stream going around. It has a lot of curves and bends and rocks. If you see the movie, The Last Raft, you can see that. It has corners and what. Okay. Now, this is, now Miriam's mother did this painting. I noticed that the river is brown. Well, the spring floods brought some of the dirt into the river, and this is why they get called logs. This is at Clearfield. Here are all the technical terms there, and they studied the plans and so forth when they built in 38 the old rafts, so it would be made there. And this is a bend in the river at Clearfield. Of course, our lumber went clear on up the cherry tree. Okay? Now this is to Honorable George R.H. Earl. And can you get that a bit clearer? The other way. And they built some arcs on the river. It's at Clearfield. It could travel that way. And here, of course, is the music then. And of course, it was March 20th, 1938, when it crashed into the bridge. Okay. Now, for 1976, Lock Haven, which was another lumber port, they built a raft, house on it, and they moored it there. Now, of course, this is now covered with their dike system. But they floated this around. Of course, they had the dike dam across down here. But they were also lumber, and you could get on the raft. And I remember, some of you may remember, they moored here, the last raft moored here on the Williamsport side of the river there, Well, it's for the Main Street Bridge, and you could get on. You could only stay a few seconds on it, but they want people to just jump on and jump off to there, all right? Now, you see here, they had this was a section of it, and there's another section down here, so when they went over the dams, they didn't get stuck on the dam. They bent a little bit. But these were crafty people. They could go through the chute of the dam. They knew the river, and that was the problem with the raftsmen of the 38. Some of them did not know the river as well as they thought they did. Okay? Now this is going, you saw this picture before, this is going through the chute, and the chute is on the Williamsport side. It was put here for two reasons. One reason for, of course, to raise the river level so that they could build the boom, and also they planned to put some kind of a water wheel there to generate electricity. The Edison company was down there, and that was controlled by Mr. Roberts, whose home was down in New Zealand. But it didn't work out too well. And of course, in the teens and 20s, 30s, then EP&L bought up. We had a separate electric company. Not many people had electricity in those days. Okay? Now, I had one industry, and these were the cut logs. And if you remember playing with Lincoln logs were round, well, the American logs were square. And these were used for building of homes. This was an industry, didn't last too long. These would be building industrial buildings, railroad bridges, and so forth. But when the Bessemer process came along, which was the idea to make steel, iron and steel together, these sort of went out of business because they were a fire hazard. So they used then skyscrapers, which at that time were maybe 12 or 13 stories tall, had steel structure, skeleton. But this was part of the industry, these squared off logs, okay? Now here's another crew, can you get that clear? Now, you have to realize that this was all human power. Two-man saw here, this was a measurement tool. There they are in their suspenders and their high boots, their overalls. There they are, and they're taking off the bark. Now, the question was asked, on the hemlock trees, the bark was more important than the wood. Because Mr. Mosser discovered that you could take hemlock and bark and make an acid that tanned leather. And of course, we were in an age of horses, cattle, and so forth like that. So leather was in great demand, the tanning of it. And some of you may remember the tannery in Newberry, which was the Armor Leather Company up in there. So this was another industry, a spin-off from the lumber. And many of these trees were sort of just left in the woods because there was a million more around. I mean, they didn't think that the supply would ever end. Well, it did end. And notice around there is nothing left. Just little sticks, more or less. And of course, many times in felling the tree, they damaged other trees. But today now, when you go into the forest department you make a plan on where the tree will fall so it does not damage other trees, younger trees. So this was just an age they went and cut everything down that they saw, took the bark off, and then, of course, and then left these in the woods and to be hauled away. Okay? Now, starting to pile them up. They would make piles of these trees in certain sections, beginning now to move them to a small stream that led into the Susquehanna. Okay? Now, this was look at the top. No trees really left. Toothpicks. Now, they're ready now, piling them up. They tried to keep them anywhere, so Tabor in his book, I think, says 12, 15 to 20 feet. Because they were manageable then. You couldn't put a 40-foot hole through a sawmill. So you notice most of them are roughly the same, not exactly the same. So they're piling them up now, okay? And of course they marked them. And this is backwards. Kids in school said, well, that's backwards. I said, well, when you stamp it on, it becomes frontwards. So they would mark the end of the tree. This did not keep the criminals. You had criminals in those days. What they did, they sawed off the end of the log of the road. Simple. And in one political campaign I read, where they had a wagon full of logs, and they had a little song, logs, logs, whose are these? Saw the ends and you'll see what they are. This was a campaign song. But you see, they all ended up in the river, they all ended up in the boom, and they were all mixed together, so they had to have some kind of marking. This was the same as the cattle in the West was branded. And of course, some of them were clever enough to take a brand and then put a couple things through here and change the who owned them. Brands were registered in the courthouse. There was a lumbermen's association, and every year the brands were marked, and you could tell who owned what wood. Now, many of the lumber companies were owned by several lumbermen. They were their own competition. Hurdy was in competition with somebody else, but he also had an interest in that logging company. So it was a complicated kind of system. Okay? Now here it is. Here's Hurdy and Company. Any logs containing these symbols on belong to Peter Hurdy. They would bid on acreage. They would say that we're going to pay so much money for this section of land for the logging in the 1 year. The other one up here is Smith. There it is. Right? Raleigh here. They're all listed here, and they were all like this. Now some of them now here's Forsman. Now he was in business with somebody else too, you know. So this is another listing in that, and it changed every year. Okay? Now, this is a whole valley. Can you get that here? That you can imagine this. A whole valley of logs. And when the rains came in the spring, then this became sort of a flowing river. Raining from the hills down, and these logs then would be shipped down towards either a valley filled with logs, and dam raised the water to float these logs. They're all ready to go. Okay? Now, if they could not move them to a stream, they had a chute, a slide. And they would put their grease on the slide and take the logs then, and they would pull out here. It looked like the Olympics, I would imagine. Slough race, open in this chute and then down. And this is where the accidents happened, because these logs came down and would jump the track or an injury. So all the way up this little flushes, you can see where the logs would be sliding down. Now they had men with axes, and they tried to control the amount of logs that were coming down. In other words, the speed of them, but they would come down. If there was a little curve in it, they would probably jump the track. So this is now bringing the logs down to the river. Okay? Now here's another close-up. Here they are, coming down here, and here the men are with axes that would control the speed of the logs coming down. Notice the trees all along. Now, this is the historic sign here. 1846 is when the boom was incorporated. And of course, it helped. It was 8 miles long, 6 miles long, but I'll show you where below the bridge too now. Built company, and it was damaged so badly in the '89 flood and the '90s. But at that time, the lumber was mighty scarce and was back in the woods. So they had to have another way of transporting the logs to be processed. They couldn't use the boom so much. Okay? Now this is Mr. Perkins, who came to Williamsport, and he had been a Maine logger. Now what happened, there were northern New York and Massachusetts and Maine loggers who logged first. Then when the logs were gone in those states, then they moved to Pennsylvania, the northern part of Pennsylvania. And if any of them survived this, then they went on to the lake areas, Michigan and so forth, out in the Midwest. So they moved with the logs. And some of them, they like the Cochrans then, were later in the business, and they moved then further west. So, but this is Perkins, and he advised the idea of this boom in the river. Okay? Now, this is an early Chamber of Commerce advertisement. Here's the boom. Beautiful wood cut here. There's the boom. And here are the loggers. There. Boom rats, we call it. Now we're going to have a ball, right, Louis, for the boom rats. So they're going to celebrate. But it'll be in the same building, but it won't be together. See? They didn't associate, okay? All right. Now this gives you an idea of what the boom looked like. It's built on land, and then filled with stones, and then taken out to the river and sunk. And then they had changed, and then they made sort of an area to hold them on.
And this was what it looked like. You could walk on the river for roughly 6 to 8 miles from Williamsport up to Linden and not get your feet wet. The logs just kept piling up and piling up and piling. And here was $100 if you damaged anything on the, but you see it was on the south side of the river because the river would flow that way. So the logs would be hitting the south side of the river and not where the Williamsport side. But the logs to be used were taken to that side to go to the mills, because there was only 1 or 2 mills on the south side of the river. Okay? Now, in the Civil War, metal money, now that's nickels and dimes and quarters and half dollars and so forth, became very scarce because of the war. So they printed, of the borough of Williamsport, printed money. This was 50 cents. Now, I understand that not much of it was put into circulation, but I have some of the original money I bought at a church basement sale. And I said to the woman, opened up the wallet, and I said, oh, look at this. And she said, oh, that's play money. She said, that's not worth too much. And I said to her, yes, it is. I said, it's stripped money from Williamsport. And I said, what I'd like you to do was contact a few antique dealers, tell them what you have and how much they will pay you for it, and I will pay you the exact amount. And that's what they did. I said, I don't want to cheat you, but this is more than just play money. Malcolm Mudge here, he was a Burgess, which is the mayor of the day, and he had to sign all of these. Now, so they're quite rare. Once in a while they come up. I saw one at Lewisburg for Williamsport. It was $150. Now, I have, well, how many of them do I have here? I could go to Florida now. Thanks. Now, the Boone Company, this was a check. It was a company. Its location, we believe, was back with the old Pennsylvania Railroad Station, back at Trinity Episcopal Church. And got a picture of the Boone here, and of course, Williamsport, and it was like a bank, but a special bank just to handle the Susquehanna Boone Company. Okay? Now, the Boone started Linden, and you notice that the river goes to the south side. So here's where it would be. It would be here and going down to Williamsport. But the lumber mills now, most of them were on the Williamsport side. Litcher and Moore were on the south side. They were below the Darksville Bridge. There was several. Du Bois had one in Du Bois Town. Its name. So this is the beginning now of the boom in Linden. Okay. Now, the boom was here. Well, long range, you notice all the years have been out. And so, but this side was used then when it was here for the log ponds and so forth on the north side. So this was an ingenious way. There was a little dam here. And you go across the Arch Street Bridge and you'll see a little island there. You'll see one there. Well, that was built up from the boom. Okay? Hiawatha was very careful to take the tops of those off. Now this is what they look like. They could stand a 30-foot flood. Now, the 36 flood was about a 30, well, I think it was almost 36 feet. But, of course, and this was way after the lumber side started to go. And, of course, they'd taken the logs up from the river when the Hiawatha went there, and they thought, well, they'd be nothing but punk. Well, they were put down there as green logs, and then the slime and sand encased them, and they came up, and they were very, very nice logs. And there is a building in Penn College, paneling, with the logs from the boom. Now, they had to be very careful, because if you have a $1,000 saw, and you send one of these logs through it, and it hits a nail or a stone, it could destroy it. So they had to be very careful of picking those out of the logs as possible. You can go to Sturbridge Village, and they have an operating sawmill just like the lumbermen use in Pennsylvania. Now, it's not steam driven like ours was, but they send them through. It goes through once and then cuts a slice off, just like the fella at Wegmans who's cutting meat. And it goes back again, and then it takes another slice off. It's quite interesting. there. Okay. But they have to be very careful of the stones and the nails that would be in there. Okay. This fellow's sitting on the top, and you can see now how high they were. He's probably a 6-foot person, and sitting down, and this was a picture there. And of course, this was the side of the river hitting it, the force of the water, and of course, they were not painted or preserved or anything. If a log of this plank or rotted out, we put another one in its place there. And as you can see, there's some that were hit and damaged. Okay? Now, the boom rats had to go out and separate the logs. This was their job. And usually I was told, and I don't know how true this is, that most of the pine that they cut down were in one general area because they sort of were put in the boom and they sort of stayed. They didn't put one at a time, they put a whole lot of them in. So they didn't have too much of a job doing it. And each of these places were different mill owners. So they went out to separate the logs. Okay. Now the hardwoods they wanted first because the hardwoods were used for flooring, they were used for the homes, furniture, and so forth. So that was the most valuable part of the lumber business, the good oak logs. And then, of course, the others were used for construction. Okay? Now, they had a navy, a couple boats, and this was used for construction. Now, here's the boom, and you see what grew up around with these islands, because it stopped the logs, and the logs sort of, some of them rotted away, and the dirt came down, so the islands began to grow around where the boom was. Okay? Now, this is what it looked like, the boom, about 20 years ago, Miriam. First, they were 100 feet separated. Then, they figured, well, what happened? Some of the chains broke, so they thought they would do it every 50 feet. Now, if you go up there in summer, this is up in Nesbitt now, people build a tent there and so forth. That's sort of no man's land. I don't know who owns the middle of the river. But this is looking down just before you take the road either to Baskers or to Nesbitt. Okay? Now, an aerial shot. Got this. And here's the main boom, you see. And then the companies would build these side booms to their plant. In other words, you take the logs from the boom and you take it over there, and of course then all these logs then could be buried into the mill itself. Now, last summer when we had real low water, if you crossed the Market Street Bridge going to Williamsport and looked to the right, you would see the litcher, those little islands began to appear in a sort of a triangle area. That was the Litcher Moor boom south of the main boom. Litcher Moor Park did not, Litcher Moor didn't last too long. Litcher Moor moved out of town, went down to Louisiana somewhere, made a fortune down there. But that was the first time I've ever seen that, Litcher Moor Park. Now, I don't know what the new bridge is going to do, but you could see it. So this summer, if there's low water, you'll see these little islands seem to appear. And so this would be similar to the side there. Okay. See, Tinsman plant was down, one of them was down on East 3rd Street, down Beltway, and everything's taken care of that now. The Tinsman plant was down there. They also had one up on the other part. Okay?
Is that like
yeah, well, the antlers would be, yes, the antlers would be west of the city. This is east. Yeah, when Market Street Bridge east, there was Litcher Moor and the Tinsman had one. Now, these were, I think now, they're sort of maybe souvenir hunters or tourists, but these people are out to look at the logs, and then they're going to bid on them. Now, some of the people who owned the tract of land and did the felling of the trees didn't have a mill. So they used the boom, paid the fee on the boom, and then the logs were sold at an auction to someone who had a mill. And these men now are looking over the logs, and they would take one or two up and look at it, and because they would say, well, now that they're good logs, and then they would look for the logs that were like that log, and then would bid on it. I'm told too they had auctions, just like you used to hear the tobacco auctioneers on the logs. But some of the people who felled the logs didn't own the mills. Now the guys who made the millions owned the land, they felled the trees, they put them in the boom, and they owned the boom, and they owned the mill. So they had all the three processes themselves. So there's where they made the money. They didn't have to pay anyone for any of the services. And this was the point they tried to get. Okay? Now, they would start to bring them in their mills. Now, if you, the trains had brakes, stationary brakes, and as the car came down, there were like pushers together. They would stop the train by pushers like this, and the loggers used the same thing. They were bringing them in from the mills, and then they would send them down and use this braking system, and then start to send them up to the mills. So there wasn't any jam up of the logs. They would directly see, they're directly connected to the boom. Each of them had these logs here. I call them braking systems there. Okay? And then they would, of course, then bring them up to the plant and then make the usable lumber, if you want to call it that. And this was in Du Bois Town, so I assume that this is Du Bois's lumber mill. And he was on the other side, well, he was on the side of the boom, too. The others were on the other side of the river. Okay? Now, here's Trinity Church. See it? So you know that this is the Maynard Street part of Maynard Street. This was the log boom, and then here they had a railroad train that had them up, and here's the endless belt that would take them up, and the loggers. And you can tell where it is by carefully looking for a feature that we know today. And this one is the tower there of Trinity. Now, in the book Charlie wrote, Valmont, there's a wonderful scene in the Valmont book that I think would make a good TV movie. There is a fight between two lumbermen, and they're on a raft that's burning. Now, this is, and of course, they're going the wrong way in the river, but that's all right. But it supposedly it took place in this upper part here. Now, I don't know the names of all these lumber mills because Tabor has a list of the book in it, but they moved around, they bought and they sold. So we know that this lumber mill was located where Trinity Church, out Maynard Street. And if you look out Maynard Street, there's a great big dip, Maynard Street. And that's where the log ponds were. I am told, and I can't find any documentation, that when the lumber industry ended, these whole ponds were there. So the Reading Railroad, of course, had the coal contract. The Reading Railroad sent the coal trains to Philadelphia, and they deadheaded them back with the diggings from the subway system in Philadelphia. And I've heard that, but I can't document it. And it sounds plausible. They sent the coal trains down to Philly, and then filled them, and then brought them back and dumped them, because that's where the Reading lines go, right up through the side of the river, and dumped them then into the pond. Okay. Now this is the Star Mill, and here are the logs. Notice how they are right along the river. Well, when the floods came, it decimated the mill too, and there was no way of controlling it at that point. Here are the logs, and then this would be a channel into it, and they would be sending them up. And if you look closely there, they would try to wash the logs. They still do this out west in Oregon and Washington. As the log comes up on this endless belt, there are streams of water, and there are men with brushes or something trying to get the dirt and stones and stuff off of the log. So when it goes through the saws, they don't break the saws or ruin them. Okay? Now, here's a comparison. Guess who? Can you get it clear there? Guess who lived in here? And I have a better picture of this. Guess who lived here? This is, let me see here. This is where Covenant Central Church is. Miriam, help me out. Whose house was there? It's Arch Street. This is Arch Street, the houses here for the workers. Is that the Deeperville? I got it. Come on, back there, Newberry, tell me what mill was down in there. Pardon?
Dodge Mills were
So
later.
Dodge, yes, Dodge Mill. This was Dodge's house. I have a better picture of it I found. And these were these houses, and of course the Dodge Mill owned these houses and rented them out. But I put that in to show you the opulent house of the millionaire and these small houses. And these are sort of works of art now. There's not one of them left now, I don't believe, is there?
No.
They're all pretty well. They were all down on the east side of Arch Street, all the whole row. When I was a kid, they were all down in there. These were the workers that worked the Dodge Mill. You know, Race Street was the race, and their logs came from the Ralston area up the way, and would come down that way, and also they got logs in the river. But Race Street was the race that came and brought the logs down. These were cabins like it, but these were the workers' homes, and that came out of their salary before they got paid their homes.
Weren't they usually conjunction with the steel mill too?
Yes, and then when the steel mill took over, yes, the Dodge Mill was gone by then, and that took over most of the buildings up in there. Then Lundy came along, and then Lundy had its, and now it's, what, you own it?
Your lumber.
No, we own it.
Dick Lundy still has a construction company on the corner.
Yeah, it's out in that area. But all these houses are sort of quaint houses there. They would make nice little homes today. This is what they call German siding somehow. Okay? All right? Now, as the logs in the immediate area west of us became gone, the loggers then started up Trout Run Way. This is the spill here at Trout Run. Now, this is a gate that flipped down and stopped the logs from coming. So they didn't, and of course this was a lower part. And then that would go down to on the Lycoming Creek and then down Race Street into the Dodge Mill. And notice the Sugar Mountain here is just gone. Logs. This is where 15 goes up there. It's just everything's gone. And of course this caused floods. This is called earth moving and everything else. So there's nothing there to hold the logs in place. Okay? Now, we had a celebration. And the farewell to the boom was gone. The logs were gone. The boom was not repaired after the flood. And this up here, I believe, is the firehouse on Memorial Avenue. Memorial Avenue going west of there below the Webster School. Or it could be, either one, this could be the tower to the Calvary Methodist Church before the new church was built. I can't tell you, but there was a firehouse up there that had a tower like that, and the church had a tower. So this is the boom now, at a big celebration that the boom was gone. 1911. Now, they started then, when they ran out of streams, they started to put in portable railroads. They put them down, and then they could be, the logs could be sent down. And this was here between Ralston and Graves Run. And they were built, I guess, in sections. So they could pick the section up, clear the land, and then lay new tracks down as the further they went. They would be brought down to the Trout Run then, and then down to Salt Creek. But notice again, every tree except one here, this one here, but the rest of them are little toothpicks in the forest. Okay. Now, Color Furniture was one of the spin-offs, the furniture place. And this was the chair. And Louis, you're the expert. When did Babe Ruth,
October 31st, 1923.
he knocked in a home run? That was where the old millionaire team played. Football and the band here, Color Furniture. And Color made a lot of chairs. Some of you, if you lift up these old chairs, I have a Color chair in my house. It has the label on it. But they made the chairs here at Color Furniture Company. And back of it, of course, was Cromar that made the flooring. Okay? This is the millionaire band. And there's the football. Now, Peter Hurtig was one of the men who made Williamsport, or Williamsport made Peter Hurtig. I have just a short bio of him because in the next year, in the fall, we're going to do a whole program on him because he is that important. Okay, now, Hurtig now, the man. All right. He came to Williamsport. He had 2 wives, and each wife had money, social position, and mills. His first wife was Amanda Taylor, and her father had a mill. And then his second wife was Judge Mainger's daughter. And of course, this is the Hurdig home here. And this is the historic market for him. And this is the Clark House there, showing Millionaire's Row from one end to the other. Okay, all right. Now, Peter Hurdig was mayor and a very important person when we had the Sawdust War, which meant that they wanted no 10 hours or no sawdust. This was the strikers. It happened after they had a convention of the American Labor Union or something here. And this is the workers now on strike. This painting's at the museum. And they sent in, after the Civil War here, they sent in black National Guardsmen, I guess, troops there to quell the riot. Now, what happened is that the mill owners were afraid of fire. You understand that Williamsburg was, at one time, was like sawdust pyramids all over. They didn't use the sawdust as we use it today to make flake boards and other things like that. They were afraid that the workers would set the mills on fire. So Peter Hurdig said, we're not making any money. And we got the rest of them put them in jail, so the governor pardoned them. And guess who the lawyer was on the strikers' side? A very famous name, Thomas Creevy. And he was part of the family, Judge Creevy's family. So here's the first attempt. They went back to work. They didn't win anything there, but this was the beginning of the labor movement in 1872. Williamsburg's boom was cool then. But it was due to political influence that they were freed, pardoned, and then sent back to work. But this was sort of a scary kind of thing these workers went on. And in the book, 4th Street story, it gives you a good picture of the Williamsport at the time, and it's the old Romeo and Juliet story. There's only 7 original stories in history. The mill worker falls in love with the daughter of the owner, and in the book's quite fantastic. He has the labor unions want medical benefits and all kinds of things like that they get this. But it gives you an idea that the Irish were the labor people that did the lumber. The Italians put in the railroads, but this happened, the boom was after the potato famine. But that book is in the library, and it's a fictional book, but it gives you an idea of how they had a great big ball, and they went on sleighs to the ball, and so forth like that. Gives you a good idea of what lumber was like living in England. Now, Peter Hurdig is famous for many things, but he's famous for his Hurdig. And this is the patent paper that he made, which is, we believe, this is a Hurdig. Now it says Park Hotel, and this was taken at the Reading terminal, which was at the foot of Pine Street, on the river. So Peter Hurdig must have had his hotel, his carriages down there to bring in customers up to the other hotel. And he also, when he started the trolley company, he had one line that ran up to his hotel. Now these were used, the Hurdig was used in New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. I do tours of the city, and some old gentleman said, oh, I know what a Hurdig is. And right snapped in my mind, I said, well, who's this smart aleck? What's he going to say? And I said, how do you know a Hurdig? He said, well, I was at Harvard Medical School. And he said, I rode this, he said, it was like a wagon. He said, we called it a Hurdig. I rode it to medical school. I said, well, then you rode a Hurdig. It's my lifetime dream to find a real Hurdig. And I wonder if there still aren't any around. There must be some. Okay? Now, of course, he made the famous hotel, the Hurdig House. People confuse this with his home. And you call hotels house then. Here, and of course, here's his trolley, horse-drawn trolley. This is the heyday of it. Now, of course, it's the park place. And they had a variety store and a gentleman's goods there. They sold boots and shoes and hats and caps, trimmings and furniture and so forth. They had a regular store. If you go to a European hotel, even today, they have like a mini store there. So this is the famous now, 4 stories today. Its top 2 floors are taken off. Okay? Now, the Liberty Bell was there in the famous hotel. And it was here on, the first one was here April 25th, 1893, and this is the print here, and it shows you the Hurdig house in the background there. There's the bell. It was here at 6:15 and 10,000 people, and they ran special streetcars up the line. People put pennies and quarters and half dollars on the tracks up.
Here is the another time, and that was in June 6th, 1904, and this was going to the Chicago Columbia's exposition. This was going to the St. Louis exposition in Judy Garland's song "Meet Me at the Fair." And this was about 4:15 or 4:20 in the morning. And guess who sent his photographer there? Dietrich Lange. This is from the Grip. Came here Saturday morning, and it was in the Grip on Sunday. You know, you can really, we've tried everything known to mankind to make that picture plain, and of course we got the microfilm, and that doesn't do justice to early photographs. And I figure somebody in town might have saved this picture. It was on about the second page of the Grip. Here it is, the 2 visits of the famous Liberty Bell. Oh, the fireman and the engineer were from Williamsport. And I thought that was unusual. And someone told me, well, usually the person who lived in the area where they worked on the railroad, because they knew the tracks. In other words, they knew the bends and so forth like the tracks. So I looked them up in the directory, and there were 2 people that, I think they lived on High Street or Park Avenue. I have that in my book there. The 2 people running the train. Okay. Now, Peter Hurdy was instrumental in the building of Trinity Church. What he did on 3rd Street from Camel Street east. If you go up there, you'll see a double house, a single house, a double house, a single house, a double house, a single house. Well, in the era there, the Depression in the 1870s, he put his workmen ready to work building the double houses. And they were rental properties. Then he left a single lot for the professional people to build that. So he owned all the land. And on 4th Street, he had a little different plan. He put churches at major corners. The Baptist Church is one, the Annunciation Church is one, Trinity Church is another, the Grace Methodist Church is between the 3rd and 4th Street. And then in Newberry, he was particularly interested in the churches in Newberry, the Baptist Church up in there. He was interested in. But this, he gave the land and paid for the construction of the building. It's good he did it when he there because he went bankrupt twice and he died in bankruptcy. All his property was sold. Oh, I should add the tower. The tower of Trinity Church is the Maynard Tower. That is his second father-in-law was the judge. And the Maynard chimes. Now, Maynard chimes play the Westminster chimes, and those chimes introduced that to America. And there are, you can go to any town in America of any size and find a church that has the Westminster chimes. This was the Maynard House here. This was the museum at one time. This is after the fire, boarded up. And of course, he died in this house, living there with the Maynard House. It's bankruptcy. Okay? Now, this is his simple marker. Well, probably the most famous man in Williamsport. He's buried on the Maynard property, and there it is. New paper says about his, he made the New York Times under the fold. But in my picture, I put it above the fold. Under the fold is less news than the top of the fold in the New York Times. But his bankruptcy caused quite a stir in the business and financial area because he had his finger in a lot of things, not only in Williamsport, but throughout the East Coast. Okay? All right, now, the other man, and we'll do a whole program on, we'll have an evening or an afternoon with Mrs. Brown and James Brown. This is Mr. Brown, a quiet man. We don't know too much about him there. Okay. All right, and this was his home there, and his wife comments that she came as a bride to this beautiful home. And it really was beautiful. This was the site on Basin and 3rd Street, and it was the site of Michael Ross's house, and also the first boundary of the city of Williamsport. That was the end of the city, Basin Street. This was magnificent there, and I don't know if that's Mrs. Brown here on the front porch or not. Okay. Now, it was Brown, Early and Company. Now here's James B. Brown and Henry W. Early and Henry and Stephen Brown, and they were at 63 West 3rd Street. That was their office. And of course, later on, the mill then was Brown, Clark, and Howe.
And if you look at the lumber marks on the logs, that the Brown and Early lumber still went to Brown Park and Howe. Brown, I feel, had an interest in the Brown Park and Howe, which was the longest existing lumber mill, or lumber and also the richest. They went out of business literally in '09. All three of them became millionaires there. One was the editor of the paper. I think Stephen was in the paper, right? Believe it or not. One of them was, yeah, partner in the paper. And when they built the library, they had to move Orange Brown's house from where the library now to across the street. Of course, now that was torn down business there. But this was the beginning now. And then Brown, of course, owned the water company too. But they owned a lot of things. Hurdick was in an awful lot of things. He had invested in things. Okay. Now, here's his mill, and here's here's the canal, and this is the mill here, there, and it was down on Maynard Street, Maynard and up to Park Street, and then Park, Brown and Howe then extended it to more up in the area there. So this was the mill. There's Brown himself now. Okay. And this is now Brown, Clark, and Howe. This was the office building. And here's a picture of their mill down there. And this was, I'll pick that up. That's a really pride. This was a little booklet, almost a paper thing that they gave out so you could put your order in. And it's Clark, Brown, Clark, and Howe, manufacturing wholesalers of lumber. And it told you how much. And here's the mill out. Was it 174 Park Street, which is now all of Penn College. There. So this was a little thing that they would give people and compliments of them, a little tablet that you wrote your order in. Okay. Now, this is, here's Park, Brown, and Howe, and it says what? They will take all of the lumber that have these different marks on there, and if you could read it up there, it says Brown and Early Williamsport. So there was a connection there between Brown and Early, James B. Brown and his brothers, and Clark and Howe. Now, Clark and Howe gave each a third of the Acacia Club. Hall was an industrialist, and he gave the other third to them. Okay? Now, this was the house, and it became the Democratic Club, and something else. And this was where the site of the Brown Library was. And it was jacked up and moved across the alley. And, okay, Miriam, this was the construction of the library. And it was in Brown's will that it be free and open to the public. And the story behind the Brown Library is that the Daughters of the American Revolution, which was founded about 1900, their project was to have a free library in Williamsport. They said there was money here to have it. Harrisburg had one, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre had one, and the other cities had one, but we didn't have one. So the gal sort of just fumbled around with it until Torilla Brown, James E. Brown's wife, became regent. And she talked Jim into giving his money, $400,000, for the building of the library. And I call that the most expensive pillow talk in history, at least in this area. So this is the construction of it. There are a lot of specifications. The bust of Brown was over the door, and the library has letters between the artist who carved it out, and pictures of it, and they didn't like it. They gave suggestions. So they had, I get from these letters, that that's exactly what Brown looks like. Or there's a painting of it in the one room there. But the family wanted a good extension here. They also have, L.L. Stearns got the bid for the curtains and blinds and so forth. But it is a beautiful building. And the person who did the history of the state uses this building as a beautiful example. I'm not an architect, but it was a beautiful building, and it was downtown Williamsport. And they built it up thinking they would be out of the flood. They flooded the basement, but it also flooded the park. And now we had to spend thousands of dollars putting elevators in so handicap accessible. But this is the biggest project we're here to perform. Also, we're going to have new pictures of this is the signing ceremony of the laying of the cornerstone of the Brown Library. Now this is a shot of the Brown Library. Here's Christ Church. Browns were members of the Christ Church. He was the senior warden in the government there. He and Mrs. Brown for a number of years. And so in his will, the rector of Christ Church is automatically on the board of directors. And the mayor of the city of Williamsport and the judge of the Common Pleas Court. They are the three members who are automatically on the board of directors.